Big Mom was never supposed to exist like this. Her hunger pangs, her tough skin, her pant size, none of it is natural. And what's crazy about this is how her mom may have unknowingly doomed her before she was even born. This isn't just a theory, it's a missing piece of her backstory that changes everything. The answer might be hidden in something we've completely overlooked, a hidden force that rewired Big Mom's body before she was even born. Something that explains why her hunger is so extreme, why her body defies all logic, and why she's unlike anyone else in One Piece. In this video, we're gonna break down the shocking truth about what really happened to Big Mom in the womb, how a bizarre environment phenomenon may have altered her genetics, why her mother's pregnancy cravings may have played a bigger role than we ever realized, and how it all ties back to a long-buried secret about the world itself. This video is a sequel to a previous one that I made about the origins of the One Piece races. You don't need to watch that one first, but if you want the full picture, I highly recommend watching it after this. And I highly recommend you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click that notification bell so you can stay updated on when I drop a new One Piece theory like this. Let's get into it. Let's be honest, Big Mom's hungers are far from normal. Even in the One Piece world context, this is a fucking anomaly. Probably something that shouldn't even be possible. In a world like One Piece filled with countless characters who can stuff their way through just about anything to the point of putting Kirby out of the gawk business, i.e. Luffy, and probably Kaido too when it comes to drinking, Big Mom seems to be the only one whose hunger completely turns her into a demon. Sure, at first glance we might dismiss her hunger pangs as just another one of Oda's quirky character gags, something played for laughs, but also kinda low-key terrifying in the way she be moving like Godzilla sometimes. But when you start to think about how she goes on that Ozempic diet the longer she's away from some wedding cake, you have to admit that something's just straight up wrong with her. Why does her body behave like it's in a desperate survival mode, even when she's well-fed most of the time? I mean, her entire empire is made out of food. She should be good, but she ain't. She is not correct.
This boy is not correct. He is flawed.
This isn't just about food. It's about her body itself. Her hunger doesn't follow what you would consider normal biological rules in One Piece. To me, that implies it's not a choice or a habit, it's a condition. And that leads us to an even bigger question. If her hunger is unnatural, something inside her must be causing it, right? Big Mom's hunger isn't the only thing that adds up. Her entire body alone is just weird for a human. She isn't just big, she's unnaturally big. She stands taller than nearly every human character in One Piece, and yet she's not even considered, at the very least, close to a giant. I mean, she's compared to an iron balloon because of her tough skin, and she literally killed the former captain of the giant warrior pirates, who was beyond the average size of a giant. That same guy got seismic tossed by Big Mom when she was only 5 without even breaking a sweat. I don't even think Kaido or Whitebeard was even that strong when they were kids. Maybe Kaido, I don't know. At this point, we have two strange, seemingly unrelated facts. Big Mom's hunger is entirely unnatural, and her body does not fit into any known race category. Do not be fooled by Oda, she is not human. But what if these two aspects are not separate mysteries, but symptoms of a deeper issue? Could her body be struggling with something it was never designed to handle? This prompts a crucial question. Is there something in her biology that explains her incredible strength and cravings? So, Big Mom's parents are surprisingly relatively normal-looking humans, so by all logic, she should have been one too. But here's where things get really interesting. Just because someone appears one way doesn't mean they don't have something hidden deep in their DNA that indicates something else. In genetics, there's something called dormant traits, characteristics that don't show up in a person, but can still be passed down to their children. This happens in the real world all the time. You can have a family with generations of brown-haired people, and suddenly a baby is born with red hair because an ancestor from way back then had that gene. The trait was there all along, it just never showed itself until the right conditions were met. So what if that's what happened with Big Mom? What if one of her parents, since we know nothing about them, had dormant giant genetics buried deep in their lineage factor? Not enough to make them big, but not enough to give them any noticeable traits. And maybe under normal circumstances, Big Mom would have just been a regular human, like her parents. We'd be calling her regular mom, maybe medium-sized mom. Maybe that giant blood would have stayed hidden like it likely did for generations before her. But something changed. Something woke up those dormant traits and forced them to activate. And this is where things get even weirder. If she were truly part giant, her body should work kind of like a giant's, right? But it doesn't. Her growth doesn't follow a normal pattern, whatever that may be for a giant. I just assume they fly out of their mom as a 300-pound baby and grow from there. That's how much attention I paid in sex ed class. Big mom's metabolism has to be one of the biggest red flags that something isn't right. Giants eat a lot, but I think it's fair to assume that they don't go into mindless hunger rampages when they don't get what they want. Big mom does. Her body reacts to food deprivation like it's a life or death emergency, like she's starving even when she's eaten more than enough. That's not an appetite issue. That has to be a biological error. And it brings up an intriguing possibility. What if each unique race in One Piece absorbs and processes sunlight energy at different levels through sunlight exposure? Don't worry, we'll connect this back to Big Mom soon. This isn't crazy as it sounds. In the real world, species absorb and process sunlight in various ways. Humans, for instance, produce vitamin D from sun exposure, but at different speeds. The color of our skin changes based on how much sun we get, and this affects how well we can make vitamin D. People with darker skin who typically live in sunnier regions don't produce vitamin D as easily as those with lighter skin, who often originate from cooler areas with less sun. Now, apply that concept to One Piece. What if all races in One Piece, humans, giants, fishmen, and others, absorb sunlight but at different levels? If that's true, then giants, because of their massive size, would naturally absorb way more energy from sunlight than humans. It would actually make sense from a biological standpoint. But here's where things get really weird. If Big Mom has partially activated giant traits, then her body might be trying to function like a giant's, but without the ability to properly absorb energy from sunlight. That can explain everything. Her body is trapped in an incomplete transformation. It's struggling to process energy in a way it was never designed for. If she were intended to absorb sunlight like a giant but lacked the ability to do so effectively, her body would continuously be starving for more energy. And if that's the case, her hunger issues arise from her body's urgent attempt to compensate for something it lacks. She isn't eating out of desire, she's eating because biologically, her body believes it's starving. This is why no amount of food is ever enough for her. It's why she can never stay satisfied and her hunger spirals out of control until she loses herself because her body wasn't meant to function like this. And this is where things get really important. If this was some weird genetic mutation, we might be able to say, well, she's just built different. But I don't think that's what's happening here, because this issue only happens to Big Mom. If this was a genetic inheritance, wouldn't we expect to see at least some other cases like this? Like maybe distant relatives, maybe, I don't know, her kids. They seem pretty normal compared to her, except for Ewan. Those Tintin-looking eyes still creep me the fuck out. That means whatever happened to Big Mom was something external that forced her body into the state. Something triggered her body to start developing like a giant's without actually giving her the full ability to function like one. And that's where pyrobloin might come in. Now, if you've been following my theories for a while, you might remember that I made a whole video breaking down the possible origins of the unique races in One Piece and how pyrobloin may be the key factor behind their existence. Again, if you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend checking it out because it lays the groundwork for why pyrobloin may not just be shaping the world itself, but also the living beings within it. In that theory, I explored the idea that pyrobloin could have contributed to the creation of giants, fishmen, and a whole bunch of other shit by acting as an environmental force that shaped their genetic evolution over time. If pyrobloin can influence species on a large scale, it raises an even bigger question. What happens when a developing life form is exposed to it before birth? Because pyrobloin isn't just a normal mineral, it's biological. It contains keratin, the same substance in human hair, nails, and animal horns. In that previous theory video, I even posed a pretty important question that deserves more attention. Why is a biological material coming out of volcanoes in the first place? Because in the real world, volcanic eruptions don't produce keratin. They vomit out lava and other hot stuff. A volcano probably birthed Akainu, if we're being honest here. But in One Piece, pyrobloin contains organic material. This suggests that pyrobloin isn't just a regular volcanic byproduct, it might actually contain something alive, or that was once alive, or something that directly interacts with living organisms. Again, I go way more into that in my theory video about the origins of One Piece races. This makes me wonder if pyrobloin, when in high amounts, could actually cause changes in genes. Like if Big Mom's mom was exposed to pyroblone, whether through volcanic activity, contaminated water, or just by living in an area with seemingly high pyroblone levels without even realizing, then it's possible that those particles entered her system and interacted with Big Mom's body while she was still developing in the womb. Instead of a slow, natural evolutionary process like we see in species adapting over thousands of years, this could have been an instant forced mutation. Pyroblone flipped a switch in her DNA that was never meant to be flipped. It activated dormant giant traits that could have stayed hidden, but it did it in a way that left her body unstable. And that could explain everything. Her uncontrolled growth, her overpowered durability, her broken metabolism, her hunger that never stops, all of it. Symptoms of a body that was never supposed to exist. And if that's true, then Big Mom is a straight up, and not to be rude, a walking biological accident. This leads us to the final piece of the puzzle. If pyroblone was responsible for creating Big Mom as she currently is, or was, if you still think she's dead, how did it actually pull that off? So as I said before, in my theory video about the origins of One Piece races, I discussed how pyroblone has a partly organic composition. It connects to sea stone and sky islands. Most importantly, I introduced the idea that it could contain remnants of Haki. Why? Because Haki exists in every living thing. If pyroblone is spewed out from volcanic eruptions and yet contains organic material, it could contain traces of the past, fragments of people, their bodies, their willpower. And if that's true, if Big Mom's parents came into contact with pyroblone, whether through food or their home environment, there could be various reasons for this contact. It's possible that Big Mom's mother wasn't merely providing her fetus with nutrients, she was feeding her remnants of the past. In other words, remnants of Haki. See, in my previous theory, I speculated that traces of Haki and pyroblone react to the survival instincts of beings that absorb it. This led me to theorize that the different races in One Piece may have evolved the way they did because the pyroblone-infused environment literally responded to their will to survive, thus changing them externally to reflect that internal change. But here's where things really take a dark turn. What happens if an unborn child is exposed to pyroblone while their body is still forming? What happens if the leftover survival instincts, the traces of Haki within pyroblone, are absorbed into a developing fetus? If Haki responds to willpower, the Haki trapped inside pyroblone may have responded to Big Mom's mother's will to feed her child. Her mother's cravings weren't just about hunger, they were about ensuring her baby grew big and strong and had everything it needed to survive. Them be pregnancy cravings. And sure enough, it may have worked. Too well. Earlier, I suggested that giants might absorb sunlight at a significantly different rate than humans and other races, which could explain how they sustain their massive bodies without constantly starving. But Big Mom, she was never supposed to inherit that ability. Her body wasn't supposed to be of a giant's, but pyroblone forced her dormant giant genes to activate unnaturally, and without the ability to process energy like a natural giant, her metabolism was left completely broken. And that's why she's always starving. Her body is stuck in survival mode. It was programmed in the womb to always take in energy, but since it can't absorb it correctly, it compensates by forcing her into hunger rampages. And maybe because of her mother's pregnancy cravings, combined with the traces of Haki and pyroblone, an unnatural mutation was created that left her permanently imbalanced. This means Big Mom's hunger is essentially a curse, but maybe she could turn that curse into a blessing down the line. The kind of blessing that could fully redeem her character in a way that makes sense and serves as the perfect send-off. If you really want to see her kick the bucket. Trust me, after all the Big Mom big memes and the I want wedding cake on repeat for how many times, I think a lot of people would be pretty happy to see her go. We'll discuss that in part 3 of this theory later on. So, if you want to catch up to this 3-part mega theory series, check out this playlist here.